welcome to another hour of good troublemakers. We always want to thank our good friend, Representative John Lewis, who gave us this wonderful notion of good troublemakers. And here we have the opportunity to find them in so many places. And today, I've got two wonderful good troublemakers, Aaron Falbel and Betsy Corner, who are war tax resistors, war tax refusers, who tell us if you don't want war, don't pay for it. But anyway, I'm so happy you're here, and now they're going to tell us a lot more. So tell us a little about this, the history of this endeavor in which you're engaged, because you've been war tax refusers for a long time, and what led you to that, and what kind of good trouble has it gotten you into?
Well, people around here may know some of it, but for me it was Randy Keeler bringing me into, who was my partner, bringing me into phone tax refusal back in the 70s when the Vietnam War was they were using the tax on the phones to pay for that. And so that was a really easy way for me, and I had no experience whatsoever in this. But Randy was coming out of 2 years in jail for draft refusal. He didn't want to kill people in Vietnam, so he went to jail instead. So he was steeped in war tax refusal from being around folks in California, et cetera. So we started not paying our phone tax because we didn't have enough income to be taxed then. And when we did have income, we started putting it aside, in part because I was not as brave as Randy, I guess, in a sense, and didn't have that much experience. But when Brian Wilson's legs were cut by an engine, he was sitting on a train track to prevent weapons going to Nicaragua. And when we heard about that, we decided we're going to take that money out of escrow that we owed for the taxes, federal taxes, and give it away to victims of war. So that was the beginning of our tax refusal. And we basically filed our tax returns so that we'd know how much we owed, and we weren't trying to hide, and we would give that amount that we owed for the federal taxes to different groups in the valley or abroad who were working on helping victims of war, or the food bank or homeless shelter, that sort of thing, where our taxes should have been going. So that was where we began.
So that's, yes.
And then it went into the IRS taking our house. They put a lien on our house, and then we had lost some money out of the bank, and they shut down the bank account. And then they finally put our lien on our house, and then basically took us out of our house and auctioned it off. And that's another story.
Whole story.
The whole story, yes.
Whole story.
Yes.
Which can be seen on Robbie Lepser's film, An Act of Conscience. It chronicles the entire community response and civil disobedience and several years long campaign after the IRS made the mistake of trying to take their house away.
So Aaron, tell us about your experience as a war tax refuser.
Yes, well, I'm a more recent one than Betsy. I'm more of a neophyte or a newbie. I can trace my entry into war tax resistance. It was about exactly 35 years ago. It was late 1990. And the first Persian Gulf War was about to happen, the one with Saddam Hussein in Kuwait. And there were all these demonstrations. I was living in the Boston area at the time. And there were these demonstrations I went to with people like Howard Zinn and Noam Chomsky and Dan Ellsberg talking, and then there were marches through the streets. And I just had this sinking feeling that all this marching and chanting wasn't going to stop the war from happening. And at some point during one of these demonstrations, a young woman handed me a half sheet of paper. And on that piece of paper had a quote from Alexander Haig, who you might remember.
That's the quote, yes.
Was the Secretary of State under Ronald Reagan. And he was driving through the largest political nonviolent protest in this country's history, organized in large part by Randy, Betsy's partner, in June of 1982. It's 1 million people gathered in Central Park in New York.
Yes,
and
we
he happened
did.
to be driving through with a reporter, and the reporter asked Haig, well, what do you think of that? And Haig contemplated this massive groups of people with chanting and signs and marching, and he said, let them march all they want, as long as they continue to pay their taxes. So that really hit me, because there I was marching through the streets with signs and chanting, and I was searching for a way to step up my level of resistance, because I felt some sense of futility that just marching through the streets wasn't enough. But on the other side of that piece of paper was an announcement of a meeting at Community Church in Boston of how one could engage in this thing called war tax resistance, to refuse to pay for this war and killing, and instead redirect it, as Betsy says, to the places where it ought to go, towards helping people, healing, mutual aid, not killing people. And so I went to that meeting, and I guess the rest is history. I was hooked. There are also more personal reasons, I think, that why this mode of resistance really spoke to me, but we can get into that a little bit later.
Yes, so do tell. What was it?
Well, my family is a family of immigrants. They were refugees from the Nazi Holocaust. Both my parents and all my grandparents and aunts and uncles came here in the late 30s or mid 40s. They were Jewish, and they were considered to be enemies of the state. My parents are both from Austria. And my father, well, let me start. My mother's family had to go into hiding because they could not get the papers, the visas necessary to get into this country. That's a whole story behind that. We had a quota system here that prevented people from gaining access to this country, getting the papers they needed. Most of those quotas, by the way, went unfilled during that time. But so my mother's family had to stay in Europe for the remainder of the war. They didn't come until 1946, after the war. So they had to go into hiding. And they were being hunted down like animals, really. They had many close calls where they could have been caught and hauled off to the camps, or maybe just shot right then and there. The only reason they survived was because there were some people who decided they weren't going to cooperate with this state-sponsored murder. And they warned my family when there was going to be a raid. They were living in France at that point. Issued them false identity papers, provided them places where they could hide when necessary, and eventually enabled them to smuggle illegally into Switzerland, which was a neutral country and where they were relatively safe. But had it not been for those people, I wouldn't be sitting here today talking to you, because my parents and grandparents would have been hauled off. And those people who took those risks to save them, to rescue them, I mean, if they would have been caught with the Jews and with my family, they would have been hauled off to the camps themselves, or maybe just shot then and there. So they took enormous risks. Yeah. So I feel I have a personal debt to pay to those people who saved my family, saved me, essentially. So how do I thank them? Unfortunately, they're long dead by now, but I feel that I can thank them in a way by trying to emulate them in this small way, and that's how I see war tax refusal, war tax resistance. Like them, I'm refusing to cooperate with state-sponsored murder. I'm refusing to pay for it. I'm refusing to fight for it. am trying to resist it to whatever extent that I can. The risks of war tax refusal is mostly inconvenience financially. It's not anywhere near what the risks these people were taking who saved my family. But it's something that I can do, and I feel that I'm called upon in some sense to pay forward the type of risks and refusal to cooperate with murder that led me to be here today.
Yeah.
So I have a debt of gratitude to pay, and this is the way I'm paying it.
Yes, it's a beautiful way to pay it. And yes, the value of allies, I think we often overlook. The price of being an ally for so many people was death.
Yeah, it is.
But such courage on the, and I'm very, personally, I would just say I'm very happy that there were these people and that you are here today because of them. Yeah. I think about war tax resistance, and we go back to that Thoreau picture of the romanticism of not paying your taxes, and how appealing that is. But what the reality is, it's hard work. Many of us don't earn enough to pay taxes, so that's one way of doing it. But I think that call of Alexander Haig, and I was going to use it myself, but I'm glad you did, Aaron, because it is so powerful, and it's such a good reminder of how the money, following the money, and but there's also the dimension, and you allude to it a little in the notion of allies, but the community that that you certainly had community, and there is a large community of war taxes, and we were talking about before we started refusal or resistance, and do you want to just kind of deconstruct that for us? What are you? Refusers, resistors, or?
Well, I think we were refusers because we refused to pay the federal tax that goes to the military for killing and war making, and we did give that money away. I mean, they never got it. They did get our house, but they only got $5,400 at auction for it, so they really didn't get the money back. But the money in terms of the IRS and our taxes is a pittance, given the big budget that goes to the military spending, and that we're still, it's humongous. And I know a lot of people are thinking about, well, some people, I don't know how many people, are thinking about tax refusal or resistance, more resistance perhaps now, because they don't want their money to fund what's going on and at this current point. And if I was still paying, I'm under income, so I don't have that option now to refuse. But if I did have it, I would certainly refuse, because I wouldn't want to pay for what our government's doing now.
Well, I think what you're leading to is something that's really important, and that is today there are not only just the two of you, but there's a whole community, extensive. I would say perhaps a network of people across the country who are involved in war tax resistance, who said, this is what I have to do, and so I'm curious what you know about how all these good troublemakers come together, and what is the appeal that brings people to do this?
I think the appeal is having a greater degree of alignment or congruence between your actions and your beliefs. Because there are a lot of anti-war people, a lot of people who believe in peace, but yet they're still paying their taxes. So you can ask them the question, do you support this war? And they'll say, no, but they are supporting it financially.
Yeah.
So that's just another way to, as I say, step up your level of resistance. In Wally Nelson, who we both knew and loved, would ask the question, I mean, suppose I knocked on your door and with a cup in hand and said, could you give me some money? I want to buy a gun because I want to kill those people down the street. They're really aggravating me. They're bothering me. Could you give me some money to do that? And of course you would say, no way. But that's, in a sense, what our government is asking us. You know, they have some enemy that they've declared as an enemy of the United States, and they want to go kill them. And you know, would you please contribute and pay for the guns and the soldiers and the weapons? And yeah, we all do it, or most of us do it, because we feel we have to. Yeah. And you know, Wally was famous for carrying around the sign that said, "You don't gotta."
Yes.
And that was one instance where you don't gotta. Yes, there are consequences. I want to make clear to your viewers that war tax resistance is a form of civil disobedience. It's not legal. There may be consequences for it, but there are also consequences for paying your taxes. And we know what those are, and those are abhorrent. And it's a question of how much crap are you willing to put up with, you know, paying for what you don't believe, paying for what you know is harmful, paying for what you know is illegal, criminal according to international law. No court in the United States has bought the international law argument. You were talking about Nuremberg before, and the Nuremberg principles say that, you know, when the Nazis were in the dock after World War II, and they all said, I was just following orders, the Nuremberg principles made clear that's not a valid defense. Even if, under the law of your state, your country, you were instructed to do something that is illegal, that is criminal, you are obligated not to do it. So one could use that same argument to say that war tax refusal is legal, is moral, you're in fact obligated not to be complicit in war crimes if that's what your country is doing, if that's what your government is doing. But no court in the United States has so far ruled in favor of that argument. But a lot of people have tried to make it, including Betsy and Randy.
And I think that's a very important point that I think, you know, we look at these laws, you know, the Nuremberg principles, and say, well, yes, paying for illegal wars is illegal, and yet it's really crouched as something that's patriotic. Mm-hmm. You know, it's the right thing to do, and you know, you know, I mean, I sometimes think of this as, you know, the voices crying in the wilderness, and yet you have to keep amplifying those voices, and it's one of the things I'm hoping we can do in this conversation, is remind our listeners and viewers that there are alternatives to struggling with your conscience that says, I don't want to pay war taxes. You know, I'm opposed to what my country is doing, and you could say any place in the world, starting at home.
And one of the things I think we've tried to do recently, we had an opinion piece in the Recorder not long ago about this, is to expand this notion of war, aside from just using weapons to kill people. That here we're living in times where our government has declared a war on immigrants, a war on the environment, a war on poor people. There's so many types of wars that where we have victims not of bombs and missiles, but of policies that can also cause death, that can harm people in serious ways. And so, as Betsy was alluding to before, you can say war tax resistance or refusal, or you can just say tax resistance, to resist the forms of oppression and autocracy and fascism that we're dealing with today. We don't want to pay for that any more than we want to pay for a bomb or a missile.
Yeah, I just want to make one point that Randy and I we believed in taxation in the sense of paying for the services, that you get from the state and local government and the federal government. I mean, I have no qualms about paying for what governments are doing, or our government is doing, or the state. If our state if we executed people, we probably wouldn't have paid our state tax. But because we live in a state that doesn't do that, we always paid our state taxes, and of course our local taxes, because they're not doing any harm.
Yes.
So that wasn't the issue. And some people would say, well, why don't you pay 50%? Because that's 50% goes to the things that are okay. Yes. And I actually went to the Social Security office in Greenfield when there was one, and asked the woman, I said, do you separate out, what goes to in the federal taxes, what goes to Social Security, what goes to this and that? And she said, oh no, it all goes to the same place.
Yes.
So that's why we felt like we couldn't pay any of our federal taxes, because they didn't, you don't get to pick those buckets. And yet when the war refusers or war resistors sometimes are out on the street on April 15th, they will set up buckets and give you pennies to put in what you want to support.
Yes.
Do you want to support your local school or health services or something else, homeless, or do you want to pay for the military or this? And people are willing to put it in those social services, but if asked to put their money into something like the military or the killing, they won't. When it's, it's like Wally's question, when it's very clear what you're paying for and what you're not, it's simpler to figure that out. And now with the issues that Aaron was bringing up, it's gotten muddier because of what the current government's doing with taxpayer money.
Yeah. Yes, there once upon a time there was the 50%. You could say, well, if I could, skip the war part, and I'm happy to pay for the other things. And of course, that doesn't happen. And even today, what are the other things? They're greatly diminished.
And that's what some people do. Some people who want to resist the taxes going to the military or killing will pay their 50% and tell the government, we're not paying this. Yes. And the government will take that money out of their bank account,
yes.
Levy the bank account. Yeah. So that's another way that people do tax resistance.
Yeah. And I think, when I think about the whole series of us people doing good trouble, making good trouble, that oftentimes it means breaking bad laws, and so I think that's certainly what I think the life of John Lewis was, until he became a good member of Congress who obeyed most of the laws, but he did a couple of things even there, yeah. But I think that invitation to be patriots. How do we take care of ourselves? How do we lead our country? How do we stand for the principles of both our country and higher good? That I think one of the ways that you're talking about is very important for people to look at. What do we do with our tax dollars?
Mm-hmm. And to say what we're doing. I mean, that's one of the reasons we got our house taken, was because Trap Rock Peace Center had a newsletter, and they did an article about us and our non-payment. And the IRS said, the local IRS, that was a red flag to us, which is kind of hard to believe in a way, because the Trap Rock newsletter didn't go out. It wasn't a public newspaper. But that was their red flag, because they don't want they don't want you talking about what you're doing when you're resisting or refusing.
They don't want you to encourage other people to do
Right.
it, really.
Right,
And
yes.
so that's why they felt they had to make an example of Betsy and Randy by
Yes.
coming down hard on them, just to show that this is what can happen if you do what they do, which of course is nonsense, but because so many people are doing it and not having that type of severe consequence. Usually what happens, if anything happens at all, is you'll get some money taken out of your bank account, or your paycheck at your job will be garnished, or some assets might be taken if you own any assets. I've not been collected on in all the, as I say, 34, 35 years that I've been doing it, because I don't own anything. I don't own a house, I don't own a car. I don't, someone once said it's like trying to squeeze water out of a dry sponge. They can't really get anything out of me. I have relatively low-paying jobs, and there's a limit below which they cannot seize money from your paycheck. So I've been able to get by without any sort of draconian consequences. But one day they may decide, okay, we're going to make an example of this guy, just like they did with you. It could happen.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody seeing this television show today will say, oh, well, we'll get him.
Yes. Well, yes, and you know, I mean, I think that's part of it, that taking these risks, you know, to stand up, even to articulate the invitation to people not to pay taxes. You know, you're inviting people to break the law, but what's the law? And I think that's where it really comes down to us today, especially today. I mean, it's so highlighted what our laws are doing, and the importance of looking at the laws, of really tapping into our consciences.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, I don't think I go around proselytizing people to do war tax resistance. I don't think Betsy does either. It's a personal decision, as I said, it comes with risks. But what I do is I say, this is what I'm doing, and this is why I'm doing it. And if that speaks to you, then you might consider doing something like this. But I don't want to be put in a position of telling other people what they should do or what risks they should take. That's up to them. But I do it openly. Betsy does it openly. We talk about it all the time. We've been on the media before. We're not, I mean, I like to make a distinction between tax resistance and tax evasion. The IRS doesn't make this decision at all, but I do. I mean, I'm above board. I let people know, this is what I'm doing, this is why I'm doing it. When I file my tax returns in April, I enclose a letter along with it, and I tell them, this is how much I owe, and this is how much I'm not going to pay, and this is where I'm sending it instead, and this is why.
There's so much more money that could be gotten from tax evaders than tax resistors.
You want to say some more about that?
Well, I mean, it's sort of a national pastime to, you know, try and fudge your forms when they go in, or
Right.
you know, get legal advice from an accountant how to, you know, cut the corners or not pay so much. And then there's the out and out evasion. Well, we have our president who's, I mean, we've got models all over the place of how to evade taxes.
And I think this is one of the ways that I really want to highlight your lives and the stance you take, that in juxtaposition to those others, that this is the honorable thing to do. The word conscience, I think, we haven't used much, but it's an important one to consider, that each of us has one. And, you know, we were talking earlier about the allies of your family, you know, and the people who could not do that, and how important it is, I think, to have communities of resistance, because any of us by himself, it's easy to go off on a tangent, to become really irrelevant, and to lose your bearings.
Right.
And I think that's where the importance of one of the importances of having community to hold us accountable and also support.
Right.
One of the things we emphasize to people who are contemplating war tax refusal is find a group. And there are groups all over the country. There's a national organization called National War Tax Resistance Coordinating Committee, NUTRIC, NWTRCC.org.
Oh, what an acronym there.
And they can put you in touch with a local group. Yeah, don't do it alone. There are people who to help guide you, support you, and that's one of the things I learned from being part of the action around Randy and Betsy's house seizure, that there's a whole community of people backing each other up, supporting people, helping them figure out the way through the hard spots when there are hard spots. And it's made such a huge difference. I'm not sure I would have continued with it if I had not been part of that community.
Yeah. And I think today people are really looking for community as a way or some way to say to not only the government, but it's like you want this collective community scream to all those CEOs who have billions, trillions of dollars made off the backs of all of us and aren't paying any taxes and are basically ignoring it's not the elephant in the room, but the climate situation. You know, if we could put our money that goes into nuclear weapons and war and shift all that money to saving this earth from the climate crisis, we could do it.
Yes.
You know, where there's a will, there's a way. And if you look at the different things, the good things that are happening out there where people are solving these issues of solar and wind and you know, just all the ways to save energy and lessen the impact of us humans on the earth, we could do this.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I can't resist not saying that.
No, I
Especially
love
if we had leadership in that regard, which
Yeah.
we do not have at all right now.
We're going down the tubes with what's going on.
We are, and I think sometimes, you know, I'm trying to remember, there was somebody once who lived in another country, obviously, who said, you know, I'm happy to pay taxes because my taxes go for school, welfare, all these things that we need, that people need. And I was thinking about that the other day with the cutting back of food stamp money and all those kind of things that, and I think, where's the social contract?
Yeah.
You know, there isn't one anymore. You know, and I think, you know, I remember visiting Greece years and years ago, and really being enamored of a lot of the lifestyle of people, and thinking, being a post-empire ain't bad.
Well, we're still in the thick of it right now, though.
Yeah.
And but you know, I think about how I was just recently watching this American Revolution, and how it's always war.
Yeah.
You know, that it's part of this nation since the Europeans arrived. That's the solution. And of course, you know, the only thing that happens in wars is who was the observant who said, yes, the big thing about the winning of the war is the uniforms change. So there's no real winning, and yet, you know, one of the things that you do, I think, in your lives as war resistors, as war tax resistors, and war resistors, because I mean, war tax is only part of the resistance to the wars, is to remind people there is an alternative, because I think it's lost often, And we need to keep amplifying that alternative. And one of the ways is war tax resistance. And the other ways are just the other ways we resist war. You resist the wars. You resist the power over. And
Well, it's I think the word to emphasize is non-cooperation. Non-violent non-cooperation. And you mentioned John Lewis, and that's what he was all about. And yes, war tax refusal is a way to say, no, I'm not going to cooperate with what I know to be wrong, come what may. You know, whatever risks, whatever consequences that action is taken, okay, I will submit to that, because I believe not in inflicting suffering, but if someone has to suffer, let it be me.
Yeah.
It's the willingness to undergo suffering rather than inflict it. That's Wally Nelson's definition of nonviolence, or part of it. And Betsy and I and Randy and many war tax refusers were inspired by Gandhi's notion of non-cooperation, of nonviolence. And so we look to that as being the opposite of war, a type of resistance that does not involve harming people, hurting people, killing people. But it's still resistance. It's still saying no. And that's what we try to do with war tax resistance. We're not going to harm anyone, but we're not going to help other people to harm others. We're not going to be a part of that.
Yeah. And I think, you know, as I'm listening to you, some of what you're saying is what we do the teaching in all the nonviolence training.
Exactly.
That willingness to take the consequences, and I think that's an important piece too. That, you know, in this age of hedonism and well, you don't want to have consequences, do you? And that's I think that's part of life, isn't it?
You've certainly suffered the consequences over and over every time you have spoken up or sat in and gotten arrested. And
well, yes, we do our part.
Paki, you've done more than your share of your part.
Well, I think, you know, and this is important, you know, I think for any of us to look at the importance of conscience. And, you know, and I'm reminded, I think one of the things I was disappointed in the film, this recent Nuremberg, was one of my heroes is Hannah Arendt, and that takeaway, that banality of evil, that these are not evil people. They're people who do evil things. And how do we get inducted into doing that? And what I see the two of you doing in your presence and in your message is inviting people to be inducted to another way. That you don't have to, as what did Wally say, you don't gotta.
Well, once you embrace this idea of nonviolence, and not just as a tactic to use, but really as a philosophy of life, as a way of living, then it opens up a whole world for you, because you start to examine everything you do, and you ask the question, is it connected with violence or nonviolence? And that will set you on a journey towards looking at everything you do and changing the way you live. And I think that's the real revolution, not one that's fomented by war, but everybody taking a look at how we live, the society we're living in. Who are we exploiting? Whose backs are we on? And how do we change that behavior so that we live more peacefully, less harmfully, both to other people, other cultures, other creatures, and the planet as a whole? We have a long road to travel.
So we take this notion of the opposite of war is not peace, but the opposite of war is creativity. And that's exactly what you're talking about. You know, that, so what are other things we do? What, you know, how do we examine what we're doing? How do we live really conscious lives?
Exactly.
And there's right now we've got so much screen time that it interferes with conscious lives, doesn't it? I mean, when I listen to it and engage in conversations with people about the amount of time we spend on the phone, on the computer, And I think, there's so many different ways that we need to counter that. And one of the ways is what you're just talking about, looking at this, how do we live our lives? And what makes a life worth living?
Mm-hmm.
Francis Crowe, who of course you knew very well and who inspired many of us, used to walk around with a sign that asked a question: do our lifestyles demand war? And of course, if you look at it even cursorily, you have to say, yes, they do. That's why we're fighting all these wars, to feed our way of life. I mean, we're a country that's maybe 5% of the world's population, but we consume 40, 50 or more percent of the world's resources. That injustice has to be maintained by war, by threat of war, by threat of violence. And again, speaking of Juanita Nelson, she used to have a little bumper sticker on the wall. She didn't have a bumper anymore. She didn't have a car anymore to put it on, but she just hung it on the wall. And it said, peace would destroy civilization as we know it. Not war, peace would destroy civilization as we know it. And what I think she meant by that, and why she felt it was so important to put it on her wall, is that our very way of life necessitates war. Answering Francis's question in the affirmative as well, that we live in a way that we couldn't live the way we are living now if we genuinely had peace, because the way we live is supported by war.
Which is why I think, students who go to a country that is much different than ours, does not have the riches we have. They may have the riches in the ground, which is why they're being sought after by greedy other folks. But if they have that experience, which Randy had and many others have had, of going to a country in Africa or South America where the poverty level is real, it allows you to see how a lot of people live in this world, and coming back to the consumption level of this country is a shock for those people. And I think it changes most people who have that experience, which is why it's a great thing to do.
Yes, yeah.
Particularly for younger people, to see what it's like to live simply.
Yes. Yeah.
We invite people to come to the Nelson homestead to see how they lived. It's still there, and at Woolman Hill and Deerfield. And, young people are amazed that somebody would choose to live without running water, an outhouse.
Without electricity. So Betsy and I are part of this group of people called the Nelson Legacy Project.
Yes,
along
please
with
tell us a little, because
six other people are involved too. So our aim, our goal is to keep the ideas of Wally and Juanita Nelson, who were nonviolent activists, subsistence farmers, war tax refusers, advocates of simple living, to keep those ideas alive and available to future generations, young people. We both had the privilege of knowing them personally, but they both passed away some number of years ago, and we're not getting any younger either. So we want to make sure that these ideas stick around, because we feel they're so important.
Yes.
And speaking of screens, you can go to the nelsonhomestead.org. There's a website, and you can watch the audio, Eyes on Freedom.
Listen to the audio. Listen to the audio.
Listen, yes. Which actually is going to be at the Athol Library tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. We're going to be listening to that with Michael and Carrie Klein, who made the audio at the request of the Nelson Legacy Project. So you can go to that website and learn a lot about the Nelsons and their values, and
they were really, we think about resources, and I certainly think about Frances often, what she gave us, what she gave me. But I think I'd like our viewers to know a little bit more about the Nelsons, because I think they were and continue to be. I mean, I got to know them too, and not and I remember once interviewing them with my little cassette in their little cottage in the winter, and that this was just the way they lived. They had no ambition to get warmer without the wood stove, and I think that it really flies in the face of what we've become as a nation, what the ideals of this nation are today. To get more, and they were just the opposite of that, and I don't know people who were ever happier than they were, or more at peace. Happiness is sort of a funny word, but certainly at peace with their lives. And I think that part of their legacy is you, that they really inspired you to continue to keep going, and I think it's so important, and it's so important for our viewers to be aware that there's more to life than what you see in the ads.
Yeah, well, one of the sort of take-home messages from that audio Betsy was just talking about, Eyes on Freedom, is that our level of consumption in this country is what's behind the violence that we're seeing in the world. Our voracious behemoth of an economy needs constant inputs, and that has to come from other people, their labor, their raw materials, their resources, and so that level of consumption is why we fight these wars and threaten to fight more of them. So in order to live more peacefully, with a greater degree of justice, we have to reduce that level of consumption. Now that goes against the American ethos to a very large extent, because we were all told to consume more. We need to grow our economy. We need to boost consumer confidence. We hear it all the time now on the radio or whatever. And we're saying, go the other way.
Yes.
For the sake of the planet, for the sake of peace and justice in this world, we need to live more modestly, more within the practical boundaries of what this planet can provide. Because if everyone lived like Americans do, we would need between 5 and 7 planets to support that way of life, to act as mines and dumps for the extravagant lifestyles that we live. So it's not, our way of life is not sustainable and can't be emulated, though many people want to. I mean, we have billions of people in India and China who want to live just like we do.
Oh.
It's not possible.
Yeah.
Yes,
It
all
won't
over
be
the
possible.
world people want to, because they'll get the television, they'll get the news, and they'll see, because there's such an allure,
That's convenient, the conveniences we have.
Yes.
But part of the resistance that's going on now, and there's a national one, I think it's indivisible, and our affinity group has been, a bunch of affinity groups in Western Mass are working on a boycott Amazon shop local, and try it out through December. And not everybody uses Amazon, but a lot of people do. And just try out not doing that, not shopping at Target, not shopping at these big ones.
You really said it, it's the word you used earlier, Betsy, was convenience. These ideas that this is convenient. I remember talking with a friend and saying, we could go to the bookstore and buy it. And she said, oh, I could get it from Amazon tomorrow.
Right.
And again, because it's convenient. But what is, convenience is a word that that we need to really deconstruct.
Well, and we're seeing, I mean, you walk down the street of Greenfield, it is not the town it used to be because of the big box stores and now the online shopping. You know, people are not shopping in Greenfield at their local store. You can't buy clothing, you can't buy a lot of things. And people used to complain, well, it's because we don't have a Walmart here, but it's really that the big corporations like Walmart and Amazon have knocked out our local economies, and we need to support them if we want to have them.
Yes.
There's nothing like having a local hardware store, a local pharmacy, you know, that you can go into and get what you need. And
A farmer's market.
Farmer's market, yes.
And the co-op even, you know.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many alternatives. Yeah, it is appalling to see how convenient it is to do this online work.
Yeah.
You know, everything.
So we have to have conscious shopping.
Yes.
You know, if you need something, where can you get it?
Yes.
That convenience comes with a high moral cost. I mean, I was joking with Betsy, I don't live my life according to convenience. I mean, I don't own a car, for example, and I came here today through the cold by bicycle from Sunderland. It took me a little less than an hour. Yeah, I don't deny that having a car is more convenient than doing what I did, but I tell myself, no, I'm not going to pay that moral price of consuming gasoline, of contributing to the global economy that assembles such a vehicle, because I consider automotive traffic, automobiles, one of the most destructive technologies ever developed when you look at the totality of its impact. Sure, nuclear weapons have a more potential destructive power, but automobiles have had more actual destructiveness if you look at it. So I made a decision a long time ago that I was not going to own a car, and I've never owned one in my entire life. Sometimes I use them, I sometimes use public transportation, but for the most part I try to get around by my own power without having to pay into things that I don't believe in. So that's an example of where convenience and conscience sort of butt heads, and you have to make a decision.
Yeah.
Maybe to do something less convenient, but more according to what you know is right.
And I'm not there. I don't bike.
Well, but you do other things. Not everyone has to do the same things that I do. We all make our choices.
Take the bus instead of driving my car by myself. Yeah, there's choices.
Yeah, but I think that's a really important thing you're raising. That I'm listening to you and I'm impressed that that your own conscience has dictated this and you follow it, and that one of the things that I often say to people, though, is, and I truly believe, is there isn't a hierarchy, so Aaron Falbel can do this, Jane can't do it, but look at the things that Betsy is doing,
right. Exactly.
And let's celebrate what each person is doing in this whole mosaic of resistance,
And the Nelsons weren't telling people, you have to live exactly like we're living. They weren't saying that at all.
No.
Because they didn't start out living that way either. It was for them a journey. So what they're inviting us to do is to start our own journeys, whatever
Yes.
starting point we're at, and take one step and then go on from there.
Yeah.
And they weren't perfect by any means.
No,
They love their...
Nor am I.
Yeah, right. None of us are.
And I think that's an important thing to say. No, we're not striving for perfection.
No.
But it's to live according to my own lights, and I think that's really the invitation to our viewers, is to that you're really bringing in beautifully, is that invitation for any of us, particularly this season, to look at how I live and how I want to live. And if I don't want to live the way I'm living, how do I get support to change that?
Because for me, the beauty of war tax resistance was that it led me to think about things that have nothing to do with taxes.
Uh-huh.
It led me to think about what are the real causes of war. War taxes are not the causes of war, they enable war to happen. But the real causes of war, as I said before, are in our lifestyles. So war tax resistance forced me to take a more careful, examined look at the way I live, the way we live as a society, and see whether or not the roots of war can be found there. And of course, there's a lot to find.
Yes. And that compromising is not a bad thing to do, but to be aware. And I think that's part of it. It's really being mindful,
Yes.
and to have a community so that I can have have a vivid imagination. I could just go off. But if I talk to you and I talk to other people and say, "What do you think of this?" and you say, "Well, Paki, I think that's a little wacky," but I love you anyway. You're a good egg, but you're cracked. That I think that's what's really that's so important too, and to say so I if I have stamina and I can do things, I'll do them, and if you don't, well, you're doing other things, and it's that letting go of those judgments too. I mean,
Right.
we can judge.
Yes.
I like what you said about the car, because I was just reading the other day about the causes of the first Great Depression, and the automobile plays big in that, and yet, and I've often thought myself, imagine if Dwight Eisenhower had said, "We're going to have a mass transit system in this country, unlike anywhere else in the world, where we'll have buses, trains, high-speed trains taking people everywhere they need to go."
And instead, we got Robert Moses and the, highway system and that stuff.
Yes, we've got the interstate highway system.
Carved up a lot of
Yes.
Yes.
lot of homes.
And these cars all belching CO2, contributing to the ruination of the planet that sustains us.
But I think a lot of people are aware of this, and I mean, and I personally, this is just a little aside. I'm so infuriated when I want to travel somewhere, how much more expensive it is to go by train than by flight.
Right.
And
Because we support the airline industry rather than the
right,
trains.
then, yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
And why is that?
Why is that? It's and so I think these two beautiful people who are my guests today, and your guests, you fortunate people who are watching this, is a reminder of the counter narrative, because you're certainly countering the ethos of the United States, of mainstream America. That says, well, consume more, and what we're saying is, no, consume less, and I'm working with the Connecticut River Defenders, and one of their things is use less, and so here's the challenge to you: how do we persuade people that using less is better?
It's less expensive.
There you go. All right.
Money talks.
Yes.
It's anything that uses heat. My mother and I had a big argument when we moved in together about, she wanted to bring her dryer to the house, and I'd never had a dryer because I worked against the nuclear power industry, and it was absurd to have a dryer, which takes a lot of energy. And she finally acquiesced. So, I have racks, which
Yes.
are perfectly adequate to dry clothes. They're not as convenient, maybe, but I don't know, they're pretty simple. But, if we didn't mow our lawns the way we do, if we didn't dry our clothes. I mean, there are lots of ways to cut consumption of energy that are doable. Yeah, they're very simple, really.
Yeah.
And I feel that living more simply, living with less, is a form of liberation, because think of how much of our lives, how much of our time's energy we spend earning money, working at a job to pay for all these conveniences.
Yeah.
If we didn't have to pay that, we could work at our jobs less and do the type of things we really want to do, the things that we find fulfilling. I mean, I think of so many people who are in dead-end jobs and are trapped there. And,
Yes.
and we're trapped in so many ways. I mean, there might be a lot of people who say, yeah, I would like to do without an automobile, but I need one. I have to get to work. I have to get to, and we have societies, we have our cities and towns designed on the assumption that people will have automobiles.
Yes.
They're not built for walking or bicycling or mass transit. They're built and designed for people to drive cars.
Yeah.
And so, yes, people are trapped, but we have to try to figure out a way out of that trap.
Yes.
How do we live differently? How do we redesign our spaces to live more ethically, more environmentally sound, in ways that don't do as much harm as we're doing now? And that's the type of thinking that I think we've been doing ourselves, and we're inviting people to join us, and that type of analysis. And that's what we're calling, and that's what Juanita called, the nonviolence of daily living. Not nonviolence as a tactic, but nonviolence looking at everything we do and ask the question, is this contributing to violence or to nonviolence? That's a journey, that's an occupation that'll take the rest of your life, and it's rewarding.
Yes.
It's
and
liberatory.
I think, as I listen to you, and my mind is going with the ideas that you're presenting, and I'm thinking, well, this is wonderful to think about both as we become a post-empire, and to lead us to becoming that, because being the empire takes such a toll on the populace, doesn't it?
It does. It's a heavy weight,
Yes.
morally, economically, spiritually.
So continue to lead us on,
And we derive so much inspiration from your example too, Paki.
I think
You're not tooting your own horn today, but you're
well-
the interviewer, but one could look at what you do and be equally inspired.
I hope somebody has sat down and interviewed you here, and have you had that experience here?
I have. Thank you.
Good.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Paki.
Well, thank you both.
Thank you.
Aaron. Thank you, Betsy.
Hope
Thanks
we
for
filled
inviting
the
us.
hour.
I think we have.